At the beginning of my journey to understand women, there was one phrase I kept hearing everywhere. Ignore her, and she'll chase you. It was repeated like a mantra by guys who seemed to know something I didn't. So I tried it. I pulled back, stayed silent, waited, and nothing. No reaction, no magic, no sudden obsession, just an awkward silence. For a long time, I thought it was just another one of those empty internet cliches, something out of forums and motivational videos for desperate guys. But I was wrong. The problem wasn't the phrase. The problem was me. Years later, I realized that phrase was just the surface layer of a much deeper concept. Something rooted in female psychology, in the evolutionary mechanisms of attraction, and especially in the silent reading women do of every male behavior. And once I understood that, everything changed. This video isn't another shallow guide on pretending not to care. This is a full dissection of neediness, that invisible cancer that kills attraction before it even begins. Because, as harsh as it sounds, there's one trait that repels all women on the planet. And unfortunately, this trait is the essence of 90% of men today. Its name: neediness, emotional dependency, anxious desire. And before you jump in saying, "But I'm not needy," let me give you the hard truth. You almost certainly are, because neediness isn't just in texting her 10 times or writing long emotional messages at midnight. Neediness shows up in gestures, words, looks, posture. It's subtle, invisible, but as noticeable as a scent no one sees, and women can smell it from miles away. If you truly want to flip the game, if you want her to start chasing you, you need to understand why absence attracts more than presence. And why, sometimes, silence speaks louder than any love declaration. There's something tragic, almost pathetic, about the desperate effort many men put into winning a woman over. It's like watching someone pour gasoline on a fire that's already dead, hoping the flames will reignite. They believe that more effort, more attention, more affection will finally spark her desire. But all they do is push her further away. What they don't realize is that this behavior, which they think is noble, actually sends a subtle and devastating signal. I'm not enough. I need to convince you that I'm worthy. And nothing is more repulsive to a woman than a man trying to sell himself like an emotional clearance sale. Society has taught men from an early age that they need to pursue, provide, act, please. And this creates a psychological addiction to trying. But effort, when not reciprocated, becomes self-sabotage. A man who gives too much without return sends one message: he is disposable. And here's the contradiction that few dare to accept. The more you try to be noticed by a woman, the less value you have in her eyes. Because what is truly valuable doesn't offer itself easily. Most men believe they'll lose a woman if they're not constantly present. That if they don't reply quickly, don't send that good morning princess text, don't drive hours to see her, she'll simply vanish. But the truth is the opposite. What drives her away isn't absence. It's excess. Too much availability, too much giving without reciprocity, too much emotional investment that was never asked for. That's the invisible root of the friend zone. The graveyard where nice guys drown in their own good intentions. Because she doesn't want the man who does everything for her. She wants the man who doesn't seem to need her. This isn't cruelty. It's instinct. It's biology. Evolutionarily, women seek men who represent genetic security, social value, and emotional strength. What does she perceive as high value? A man who isn't desperate. A man who knows he's the prize. A man with options. A man who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. That's why when you try too hard, when you show up too early, too available before she's invested anything in you, she doesn't think, "Wow, what a great guy." She thinks, "What's wrong with him to be this available?" This is exactly what the original video captures with surgical precision. The problem isn't the gesture, it's what it silently communicates. Attraction psychology doesn't respond to what you say, but to what you subcommunicate through your actions. When you give too much without return, your subcommunication screams, "I'm scarce, I'm afraid, I need you to validate me." And here's where most guys fail. They try to seem confident, but act like someone begging for validation. They behave like someone who needs a woman's attention to feel like a man. And that is the biggest poison to attraction. A man who needs to be liked, accepted, or desired never will be. Nietzsche once said, "What is good? everything that enhances the feeling of power. And that's the exact opposite of what neediness transmits: emotional weakness disguised as kindness. Excessive effort is a plea for approval in disguise, and she feels it. Even if she can't explain it logically, her body senses it. Her mind understands it. Her instinct rejects it. So if you think you're losing women because you're not enough, maybe the truth is more brutal. You're losing because you're trying too hard, because you're giving yourself away before being desired, because you're offering everything when she hasn't asked for anything. And in her mind, something truly valuable would never be that easy to get. When you understand that too much effort is actually a signal of desperation that kills your attractiveness, you'll start to realize that seduction isn't about trying. It's about provoking, creating tension, allowing desire to arise, not from insistence, but from controlled scarcity. And that's when ignoring starts to make sense. Ignoring a woman was never about total absence. It's about communicating presence without being available. And that confuses, intrigues, disarms. Because while every other man is trying to take up space in her life, you simply don't compete. And that, paradoxically, is what makes you stand out the most. The psychology behind it is far more instinctive than logical. It's the silent game of subtext, what is said without a word. The woman senses, even without understanding, that there's something about this man who doesn't beg, who doesn't chase, who doesn't bow down. He is scarce, and therefore, valuable. This behavior activates an ancestral trigger. In primitive times, the most desired man was the one who had options, who didn't need to beg for female attention, who led, who chose. That got hardwired into the female unconscious. The scarce man, the one who seems to have a purpose of his own, a life beyond her, a mind not orbiting around her curves, is perceived as someone of higher value. Not because he says so, but because he behaves that way. When you ignore smartly, you're not saying "I don't want you." You're saying, "I don't need you to feel complete." And that is one of the most seductive messages a woman can receive. Because women don't fall in love with what's available. They're drawn to what is mysterious, challenging, just vague enough to activate the mental game. Attraction at its core is a game of imbalance, and that game is won by the one who needs the victory the least. The problem with most men isn't that they're not good enough, it's that they try to prove that they are. And in that desperate search for approval, they give the game away before the first move. Robert Greene in The Art of Seduction nails this perfectly. Seductors do not rush. They create enchantment and connection, so desire becomes inevitable. They know awakening love is more powerful than provoking instant lust. And the first step of that enchantment is scarcity. Calculated disinterest. The silence that allows her imagination to work. And once imagination enters the game, no logic can push it out. But here's where many get it wrong. Ignoring is not ghosting. It's not being rude. It's not vanishing with emotional immaturity. Ignoring is, in practice, withdrawing your emotional energy from her and redirecting it to yourself. It's creating a vacuum. And vacuums pull. The human mind hates blank spaces. When you create that silence, she starts filling it with assumptions. And the more assumptions, the more thoughts. And the more she thinks about you, the deeper the emotional involvement grows, even if she resists it. Scarcity communicates something obsession never can: self-sufficiency. And that's a psychological aphrodisiac. A man who has a life rich in experiences, goals, friendships, ambition, communicates that his world does not revolve around any woman. He doesn't reject, he selects, and that changes everything. As Ortega y Gasset once said, the combination of fascination and surrender is the essence of love. But fascination is only born when there's mystery, distance, emotional curvature. A woman needs to feel she's facing something she cannot easily control, something that provokes, that challenges, that doesn't offer ready answers but implicit questions. And that's why ignoring, when done well, doesn't cause anger, it causes obsession. This is where subcommunication becomes central. Seduction is not in the gesture, but in what it reveals. Ignoring is powerful because it shows you're not emotionally starving. You're not seeking love to fill a void. You malhe. And it's precisely because of that wholeness that you become so hard to walk away from. The overly available man who chases, replies fast, justifies himself, gives in too early, provokes no emotion. He only makes things easy. And everything that's easy loses value. Have you noticed that artists, leaders, the most desired men always seem to carry a certain emotional distance? That's not arrogance. That's strategy. Strategically, ignoring triggers 3 psychological effects. First, it breaks the pattern. She's used to men bowing to her beauty. When one doesn't react, she feels something new, and all that's new is intriguing. Second, it creates cognitive dissonance. She thinks, why isn't he trying to impress me like the others? And that makes her think even more. Third, it activates unconscious competitiveness. The woman wants to prove she can seduce you, and now she joins the game. And when she joins the game, she starts watching you, testing you, looking for cracks. She starts feeling curious. And curiosity, as Oscar Wilde said, is the only elegant form of obsession. When a woman is curious about you, she's no longer in control. And once you realize that, that's when seduction truly begins. Something shifts the moment you flip your focus. When, for the first time, instead of asking yourself if she likes you, you ask, do I like her? That's the exact moment when the dynamic flips. Because the entire structure of seduction is built around who is pursuing and who is offering value. And as long as you're trying to be chosen, you're just another candidate. But when you act like the one who chooses, everything in her recalibrates. Her body, her mind, her energy starts moving toward you. Because now, you've become the prize. This is where the inverted game begins. And it's brutal. Because it demands emotional control. It demands silence when impulse wants to speak. Distance when fear screams for attention. It demands that you hold your value even when she tests you. And yes, she will test you. She'll say you seem like a player. She'll provoke. She'll try to pull you off your center. And that's where most men give it all away. The average man reacts, justifies, rushes to prove he's not just another guy. But the man who understands the game doesn't fall into the trap. He smiles with a glint of irony and says, maybe you have a good eye for rare talent. That's the moment she stops evaluating you and starts wanting to win you over. And the secret here isn't in techniques, it's in your internal state. You're not pretending not to care. You genuinely don't care about any woman who hasn't proven she deserves your energy. And that shows, in your eyes, in the pause before your response, in the fact that you're not always available, that you have a life, that she needs to enter your world, not the other way around. Calibrated absence is the silent weapon of magnetic men. It's not about disappearing. It's about never being where she expects in the way she expects. It's creating presence even in your absence. Leaving a sentence unfinished, a story without an ending, a subtle tease. Because seduction isn't about giving answers, it's about provoking questions. Not about offering instant comfort, but generating tension. And there is only tension when she doesn't quite know how you feel. And here's the peak of the inverted game. You become the mirror. The reflection of her own desire. You don't offer affection to win her over. You offer mystery, limits, and selective presence. And all of that says, I'm whole, I don't need you, but maybe I want you, if you earn it. That ambiguity is lethal. Because, as Baudrillard said, desire is born from absence, from delay, from impossibility. At this point, you don't even have to ignore her. She's already chasing. She replies faster, asks where you are, says she misses you. And when that happens, remember, it's not time to give in. It's time to stay grounded. Because now, you set the pace. Most men fail here. Because when she finally shows interest, they revert to who they were before. Available, anxious, overly loving. But you won't do that. Because you've understood it's not about manipulation. It's about living in a state where you never place anyone above yourself. Not even her. Especially her. And that's why, ironically, when you stop trying, that's when everything begins. Because you're no longer chasing, you're grounded, anchored. And she senses that to reach you, she has to move. And when that happens, she's the one who starts playing the game,